Hello everybody, welcome to Tpull's Corner. I am Travis, and today instead of gameplay, we're going to discuss the change to the rotation schedule announced by Wizards of the Coast. They made the announcement while I was traveling out of town, so I couldn't do a faster real-time response, but it turns out I was glad to wait because I was able to catch Cover Go Blue's take on it. And I have a different perspective and one I want to share with you, so here's the plan. I'll explain for newer players what normally happens, then I'll go over the company's announcement, and then I'll review CGB's reaction. And finally, I'll offer my own reaction. My channel is almost a polar opposite to CGB, so that gives me a different perspective. And let me caveat by saying that nothing CGB says is false or wrong. His viewpoint is completely valid and accurate from his vantage point. But the game of Magic the Gathering is so fragmented, I call it fractionated, partly because there are so many different formats and so many ways to play the game, that different sections of the player base will receive this news and react to it differently. It's important for me to represent this other viewpoint because the vast majority of YouTube creators are in the same boat as CGB. So you may be hearing a lot of the same thing all for the last week. And it's worthwhile, as Paul Harvey used to say, for you to hear the rest of the story. Okay, so remember to like and subscribe as we kick this off for the newer players and explain rotation. Modern Standard only uses 2 years worth of cards at a time. This is both in Paper Magic and in Arena Online. At a certain point, some sets drop out as other sets come in, and the changing game environment is part of the reason Magic is still going strong after 30 plus years. You're not playing with the same cards all the time. If you want to play with your old cards, you can. Arena has Historic and also has Explorer format for that. But most of us play with the newer cards as they are introduced into Standard. So what I call the Great Rotation happens each September when we're due to lose a lot of cards all at once. And let's see, let me see if I can put this on screen real quick. There we go, the Alchemy and Standard Rotation. And here down at the bottom we have the Standard 2023 coming in September. And we have Dominaria United, Brothers War, and the question marks turned out to be Phyrexia All Will Be One in March of the Machine. So here we can see that we were going to say goodbye to Innistrad Midnight Hunt, Innistrad Crimson Vow, Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, and Streets of New Capenna. And Baldur's Gate dropping out of Alchemy, but we ignored that just like we ignored Baldur's Gate in the first place. Wizards has canceled this year's rotation for 2023, meaning we will have all these cards available to play with for an additional year. They will go away in 2024 instead, and going forward in both Paper Magic and Arena Online, we will play with access to 3 years worth of cards. So instead of maxing out at about 8 major sets and maybe some supplementary stuff, we will get to play with 12 sets worth of cards. And so they talk about it in their Revitalizing Standard. Here's Aaron Forsythe. And he's been with Wizards for a very long time. He's risen up the ranks over the years. He solicited feedback a while back, recognizing that Standard was dying out at local gaming stores. He's the head of the effort to better support Standard in paper, and this is the opening salvo in their effort to fix things. It might even be the biggest arrow in the quiver, but there's supposed to be some additional changes in the pipeline coming our way that add to this in some ways part of a larger strategy. And part of what Forsythe recognized is the Commander format's been growing a lot, but Standard events have really been dwindling in the game stores with reduced participation. I'm not sure if it's dire enough to use the phrase dying out, but that's the term that's been thrown around, so it is a serious concern. I'll come back to the economic part of the discussion later, but now I want to cover CGB's reaction. It's almost all negative, and from his vantage point, for very good reasons. One is that he plays ranked, and the other is that he's a YouTube content creator, and generally speaking, you really look forward to rotation his way and mix things up for both of those things. Since he plays ranks and his content is mostly geared towards climbing the ladder and earning these rewards each time, he's constrained by the meta environment. He can't ignore meta, right? He can't ignore that his opponents in Mythic Ranked are using the most efficient cards in their attempt to win, and he has to fight fire with fire in that sense. But that also means he has to keep using a lot of the same cards, right? What about Shieldred? Yeah, Shieldred the Apocalypse. Let's just add that to our little deck list here for the evening. You know, how many times have you seen Shieldred? How many times do you see Fable of the Mirrorbreaker? How many people are using Wedding Announcement? Why is my computer freezing? And so on. And that can get stale. For one thing, it means lack of variety. And he's stuck playing the same thing all the time and playing against the same thing all the time. And you think he might be against facing, a little tired of facing an on-curve wandering emperor for another entire year. CGB's already admitted to some burnout facing this constantly. Still mythic ranked grind. And he's been getting more into commander format and exploring wider aspects of the game just to hold even his own interest. Add to that the issue of content creation. When he goes to create a new blue-white control deck, he's still using mostly the same cards each time now. So rotation was maybe going to allow him to switch out a card or two with the upcoming Wilds of Eldraine expansion. But if the older cards don't rotate out, can anything new really replace something like Invoke Despair? And a ton of other content creators are in the same boat. Everyone's decks are looking like everyone else's. And how exciting will the environment be even introducing new expansions if the old cards don't rotate out and the old cards are still better? The alternative is new expansion power creep, and that prospect brings even worse problems up for us. We really want to avoid that, or the game itself will break. So that's the main line for CGB and a lot of other longtime content creators. Now we arrive at Tpull's corner. And in Travis's little corner of magic, there are some things that are actually good for us here. First off, I don't play ranked, so I'm not as limited by the meta. I can't completely ignore it, I'll get crushed, but I have a lot more room to experiment. I have a playlist of half a dozen videos already that show why I don't play ranked, because the shuffler punishes me for even trying. Like, it is so bad, I feel like I should be able to bring the shuffler up on war crimes, charges for how it treats me. And the irony is, in order for me to document this pain and share it with you to prove my case, I actually have to go in and play more ranked than I normally would, just to show you why I don't enjoy playing ranked. And another difference between most of the other Magic content producers is editing. If CGB is getting dealt one land in his opening hand, he's not showing it. He edits those games out. And you can't blame him. He doesn't want you to be bored. Now, I've got like a family and a full-time J job, another hobby, an additional side project, so there's zero time for me to edit as well. I hit record, and what you get is raw footage. Even for discussion videos like this, if you watch like Tolarian Academy and similar talk stations, so to speak, they have cuts as they switch from one point to their next, as they set up their next cue cards or assemble their thoughts or maybe add special effects. Here you're getting non-interrupted stream of consciousness talk, and you're kind of counting on me to have a good enough handle on what I want to say that it won't dissolve into a bunch of stutters and stammerings as I struggle to remember my train of thought. Same as my gameplay. I hit record and we do everything in one take, so you know that I'm not hiding anything, I'm not editing anything. You're getting the raw footage. So if CGB is getting dealt only one land in his opening hand in ranked, he's not showing that to you, he's editing that out because he wants more interesting gameplay to show you. For my playlist of why I don't play ranked, I want to show you that the shuffler behaves different whenever I shift over from regular play to ranked play. So for reasons of both the meta structure of Mythic Ranked and the desire to stay fresh and exciting on YouTube within that ranked play framework, most creators really prefer the existing rotation of 2 years. My channel's different. My psychographic is not as much of a spike, but a much larger concentration of Johnny, meaning I have more fun being creative than winning. You know, I have chess trophies on my shelf. I've won national awards in my chosen profession. If all I wanted to do was win, I probably wouldn't bother streaming. There were already a ton of YouTube channels hyping Mythic winning decks when I signed up. I didn't think the ecosystem needed one more channel of that. So I take the cards and I build decks around them and offer up things that nobody else is showing you. So let's take... if I can spell it correctly. Let's take Containment Construct, for example. Okay, nobody was using this card in ranked, right? I have an entire playlist of videos going through the full color pie, all focused on showing how to use this card in different situations. Colorless deck, blue, a blue deck with Containment Construct, a white deck focused around it. And if your opponent ignores this card, it can cost them dearly. It's a fun card. If it stays around longer, the newer expansions will spark new ideas, and I can already tell you, I've got another deck I want to make with this card. It's not going to be something that you're going to see in ranked on these other channels. This is the nice thing about our ecosystem here at YouTube. You don't have to pick one streamer and only view them. You can watch, like Mono Black Magic for his jank, tune into CBG for Commander, watch me for my unique brand of jank, and someone else if you want tips on drafting. There's room for all of us, and if you got enough time after watching this to catch one of the others, then enjoy as much content as you can stomach. It's all good. Now for Tpull's Corner will benefit from cards staying around longer. I put out a video a day, and on average that's been 4 to 5 new decks every week, and I still have a long list of ideas I haven't even begun to create decks for. If the last year's rotation had been postponed a little bit, I could have produced easily 20 more different decks. The current rotation speed is too fast for me to explore all of these cards before they go away. So the greater the card pool, the greater the number of potential combinations to make, and also a chance for Wizards of the Coast to fix some things as well. What do I mean by that? Let's look at a couple of examples. Here, Light Paws, Emperor's Voice. This needs enchantment auras to work, right? And I just like Containment Construct, I have an entire playlist. We've put a white-blue deck together, white-red, white-green, white-black. We went through the entire color pie and ransacked it for valid enchantment auras that we could use focused on Light Paws and make a deck of it. And we were pretty successful for the most part, but I noticed, and I probably commented at least twice in 2 different decks, that there weren't a lot of choices. There wasn't a lot of support in the immediately preceding expansion sets and the following expansion sets that came on. There were too few auras to really support this card. And I think that was an oversight. It's not like, I don't think that they create cards with historic in mind, right? They're usually, if they do, they're usually thinking about how do we not break historic. Most of their concentration when they design cards is for limited and then for constructed. And if we have, when we get a new expansion, the next expansion is going to have enchantment auras. It should have at least one for each color. And I can revisit those decks and say, hey, maybe there's a new enchantment aura I can replace that will suddenly make that deck work better when it didn't. Or maybe I can just add it into the mix and see what new combination I can do that I wasn't able to do before. So that's all positive for me because, frankly, Wizards of the Coast is putting out so many cards and they're spread a little thin in personnel, in resources, and things are slipping through the cracks like this. In the old days, they would be looking at this card, they would have been playtesting this card more, they would have recognized that there wasn't enough support for it, and they would have had a chance to fix it. So now, if it hangs around longer, we have all the existing enchantment auras, there should be new ones in the next year that we're going to get all these different expansions. Maybe this card's going to get better. Maybe it might be competitive and ranked for all we know by the time we're done. What else? Let's look at something more modern. Streetwise Negotiator. This is March of the Machines with the backup feature. And a tactic I like to do when they put it into the game every now and then. This creature assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. Now, if you play this and put the backup counter on the Negotiator, it turns into a 1/3, which means when combat hits, it's a 3/3 that you're getting for only 2 mana, which is fine. Or if you put it in on another creature, you can assign the backup counter to another creature, and it will get this ability for 1 turn, just until the end of the turn. This card does not have enough support right now. There are not very many cards that have toughness greater than power, not at a sufficient number. Like 0/2 is pretty lousy comparatively, right? Here's Enduring Bond Warden, it's 0/1. So I can make it a 1/1 instead of a 0/1 when it attacks, that kind of thing. This is kind of a surprise card that you use to end the game for the most part. But you look at the March of the Machines cards, a lot of them have creatures that have power greater than toughness already. They did not put a lot of support into this card. You go back to the older expansions, and we have Ancient Lumberknot, and I've made like 3 decks with this card. Each creature you control with toughness greater than its power. Hey, look, it's the same thing. Assign combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. This is a more expensive card. It costs 2 more, but instead of a 0/2, it's a 1/4, which turns it into a 4/4, and the effect stays permanent. It's not something you can give to one creature until end of turn and then it's gone. This is a vastly superior card. And when we still had access to Zendikar, I had a 0/17 Legendary Crab that I could put on there and turn it into a 17/17, and then I would add in like Maskwood Nexus and put down Geralf, and it would become a crab zombie, and suddenly I'd have a 17/17 flyer on the board, and that was a really fun deck. After the rotation, the biggest thing we had was Unhallowed Phalanx, which is 113. And if you look in the last 4 expansions, there's nothing that comes close to Unhallowed Phalanx. So if you're going to try and do something with Street Knight's Negotiator, it's almost laughable, because why wouldn't I just put in 4 copies of Ancient Lumberknight instead? It doesn't work. Unless I can somehow get down Unhallowed Phoenix, the more expensive card, sooner, have it survive being tapped, which white can really destroy a lot of tap things easy, and then play Street Knight's Negotiator later and assign it to Unhallowed Phalanx if I can get it through untapped. That's a tall order. This card needs more cards closer to something like Unhallowed Phalanx. And I'm looking at stuff, I'm trying to make the deck valid. We've got 0/4 with Don Horton Mentor. I've got a little Converter Tier thing that starts as 0/1. We can incubate for 5. I don't know if that's really very good. I'm still looking at stuff. But the point is, we need other stuff. And this will give, if these older expansions don't go away, then we will still have the ability to use the Phalanx as part of this strategy, but maybe in the next expansion or two, we'll get another creature or two that has something similar to this, and that will help us out and make the deck viable, because right now I can't make it work, and we need some help. So this is what I mean when I talk about let's create decks, let's have these older cards stay around longer, let's have Wizards build in support for the stuff that's already there. This gives them a good chance for them, before they finalize the new release sets, to go back and look at the meta environment, look at cards like this and recognize that, oh, you know what, we didn't quite build in what we needed to in order to have people play with this card, in order to make it a fun kind of play, especially considering all those bigger, more flashy, efficient cards that it's got to go up against, like Fable of the Mirrorbreaker. That's obviously, for its power, its value, it's so much more powerful, right? What about Toxic? It's a parasitic mechanic, meaning if you want to play with those cards, you mostly have to stick to the cards in that one set. I made 4 decks. I've got an idea for 2 or 3 more. I think you're still waiting to see 1 or 2 of those Poison videos still. I haven't released them all yet at this point in time. But that's basically it. If those cards are around longer, Wizards might add on to that environment, enable more or better strategies, or maybe finally introduce, a counter. Either way, they will now have an opportunity to attempt to make it more fun for us, because a lot of people are not having fun with Toxic. And it's kind of a small environment, but it's having an outsized impact on the environment because of the alternate win scenario that makes it easier, right? And I look forward to this extended stay with our cards, because I can experiment with new upgrades to old decks. I get to play with some of my favorite cards longer, and I have increased potential to discover more combos than ever before in the standard environment. So maybe a deck I couldn't get to work before will now work. I can finally make an interesting video for it instead of having it sit in my needs work folder, that kind of thing. Okay, now Alchemy. The Alchemy format will stick to its 2-year rotation, and that's a good thing. It will help differentiate the formats better. Alchemy, in theory, is a better fit for the modern young gamer mentality. These are the people used to buying a new game, playing it for 3 days straight, beating it over the weekend, and then they're done with it. It's old and boring now. They'll trade it in for some new game to churn and burn. The extra cards specifically added on for Alchemy are geared to keep this type of player continually engaged. Even CGB in his comments admitted that Alchemy is logically where he should be, but Wizards doubled big time in rolling out Alchemy and including those cards for use in Historic, for example, instead of creating a separate Historic with Alchemy option was a big misstep also. According to CGB, his viewing audience would not follow him to Alchemy. And even though Wizards tells us that this is their high-volume format designed for the whales that can afford to spend big, and desire that fast-paced, constant additional content to keep them, giving them something new and interesting to do, it's not doing quite as well. Now, maybe in time, Wizards of the Coast will get it right for Alchemy. That's a whole other podcast in and of itself. But I think the change is good for Alchemy, and maybe some of the people that want faster pace, that don't get bored, maybe they will shift over there, and we won't be facing them playing these same old cards because they got bored doing that. Now, I'm not that needy as a player, so to speak. I'm much more willing to slow down and settle in with my games for an extended period of time. I'm still playing StarCraft on occasion. If I could get my older Warcraft modules working, I'd probably play those more as well. You're listening to a guy who, when his Nintendo cartridge stopped working for Genghis Khan, went and found an emulator online and kept playing that game for as long as the emulator was up and running. I like to examine these cards. I like to experiment. I like to do as much as I can with them. And quite frankly, the pace of rotation is too fast for me, and it was too fast for me when I started more than 20 years ago. I would go into a tournament, I would finally have a tournament-worthy deck, I would place in the tournament, and the next day the new banned and restricted list would come out, and my key card was suddenly banned. And it's like, it felt like it was personally directed at me, and it wasn't. There was more going on than just me, but I realized that I probably would not be able to financially sustain that kind of churn and maintain competitive in tournament play, which I was interested in doing when I was, 30 years ago when I was a younger person. So nowadays, it's still, even Arena Online, it's free. It's free to play. I don't get 100% of an expansion set when it comes out. I'm topping out at, between 84 to 92%. Now, that's also because until recently I had an artificial ban self-imposed on myself against using wild cards, and I only recently broke that ban. But even if I burned all my wild cards, I burned all my commons on March of the Machines, and still only got like 2 of the colors and 1 in the artifacts for the common, and I still had so much left over to get in common. Couldn't do it. So wild cards aren't the full answer to getting the full set either. I want to play with these cards. I want to have them around long enough that I can get them for starters, either in draft play or getting enough wild cards or something or other. I want to experiment with them with each other, and when a new expansion comes out, my brain is focused on those old expansions and what suddenly possibilities open up for me to do. And that's good for this channel and my strategy and what I do. And so, again, when we go back to CGB and what he's doing, he's somewhere else. He's up in Mythic Ranked. He's grinding. He's facing the same cards day after day. As I said, it's just, he really needs that rotation. He needs to keep things fresh. He wants to keep it fresh and exciting for his audience. And for me, I'm kind of like a counter-programming alternative source for you. So I'm getting to show you things like Light Pause and Containment Construct, and you're not seeing those on other channels. This is almost the only place to go for that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the state of affairs. Let's go ahead and, to close out, let's go ahead and talk about the economy, okay? I just want to mention, let me switch over to the interactive chart for Hasbro real quick. These guys were up around 80, 82, 83 per share, and they had just a constant slide, and they had a couple of days where they were like down 8% and that kind of thing. And then I think they bottom out over here for this year, and they got down to, what was around 46, 40, what's that? Hang on, let me position this so we can actually see where it is. It's because I was on Arena, it's taken a while for the interactive browser to catch up. So here's a low like $46.79. That's a big swing, big swing from their high of 82. And they actually went up for their 52-week high was $92 per share. And a lot of part of what's going on here is they were overprinting cards. Magic the Gathering is a share of Hasbro's overall income, but it's an oversized share of their profit. And if you're going to print too much, guess what? That's going to eat into your profit. Mark Rosewater said previously in podcasts, you can have the most successful card expansion in history, but if you printed too many and you overdo it so that supply exceeds demand, it's going to fail. It's going to hurt your company because you poured too much money into the product itself, into copies of the product, and you didn't move enough. So when they say that they are keeping the older cards around longer, is there an economic reason to do that we can see in here? Very possible, because a lot of the local game store owners might have been stuck with that extra cards. People know the rotations are coming up. They're saving their money for the new expansion. Now all of a sudden, hey, there's 4 or 5 expansions that you're going to get to play with for another entire year. Maybe, oh, you know what? The game store still has some of those cards. Maybe I'll try and get that mythic rare that I don't have yet for my collection after all. Maybe I'm going to spend some money on those packs now, whereas before I wouldn't have at all. So I'm not saying that that's a nefarious reason that influenced part of their calculus on this, but I think it would be foolish to ignore the possibility that that was part of the conversation that they had, because they're part of Hasbro. Hasbro has big investment in them, right? Since they're an oversized share of the Hasbro profit percentage. They have a lot riding on Wizards of the Coast to be successful, because they are the standard bearer. They are pulling in the lion's share of profit for Hasbro these days as it is. So, hey, here's a chance to maybe fix a mistake that they did before. And at the same time, maybe allow the game store owners to get rid of some extra inventory. Maybe give a boost to Paper Magic for Standard, which is what the whole point of this move was to begin with. Everything is being done. And again, I don't want to make it seem like Wizards of the Coast is being nefarious here. They are trying to help out the local game store owners, which are part of their infrastructure, to increase a section of the game that needs support. And it's going to be a good bottom line for everybody. Wizards is going to sell more cards. The game store is going to sell more cards. We're going to get to play with those cards a little bit longer. We're willing to buy them perhaps a little bit easier, whereas before we weren't able to, and that kind of thing. So I think that there's an economic potential there. Now, when you look at what we've got here, we had originally rotating out in 2023. Now we're going to lose these 4, the 2 Innistrad Kamigawa Streets of New Capenna, in 2024 instead. So we'll get to keep those 4. We'll get to keep playing with Dominaria, Brothers War, Phyrexia, March of the Machines, and March of the Machine Aftermath, which just came out. And then we're also going to add to that Wilds of Eldraine and the Lost Caverns of Ixalan, as well as the upcoming other 2 sets, which haven't been identified yet other than by their code names. So that's what we're looking to play with. I think I like it from my vantage point as a YouTube content creator for my viewing audience, which is it's relatively dinky compared to everybody else who's been around for multiple years. I'm not in competition with CBG. I'm just not. And there's no way I'm going to be anytime soon either. But, I'm here as part of my hobby. I enjoy creating the decks. I enjoy showing them to you. I enjoy hopefully offering something unique to the community. Some people are doing commentary. Some people are specializing in draft. Some people are specializing in tournaments. Some people are specializing in ranked. I think that I'm kind of specializing in janked and an in-depth, thorough examination of cards that don't get as much attention in the environment. And that's fun for me, and I think the subscribers that I'm getting are the ones that it's fun for them, that you found me because this kind of thing is hitting something in your brain that says, oh yeah, I kind of like the way that goes. And that doesn't mean that you can't enjoy things like CBG and MTG Malone and those guys, because they've got some good content out there, and they've got some good decks. But at the end of the day, I don't want to just keep playing a variation of like the 4 Atraxa deck, 4 copies of Atraxa. I do like to vary it up. I play multiple decks every evening. I don't just pick one deck and play that same deck for the entire night. I would get bored. I need my variety. And it's very interesting to see this kind of change announcement that affects the environment, and to see other people say, oh, I need variety, I need change. And for me, I found a way in the way that I'm constructing my decks and examining our resources that I feel it allows me more variety in this environment with having an extra year to play with these cards and have them interact with the newer cards. Whereas other people, they're so constrained by the current environment and what they're dealing that they feel, I can't really go and use those other cards. I have to use these powerful cards in order to stay competitive because I'm playing ranked. And so that's their problem. So it's an interesting kind of juxtaposition where I feel like I'm actually getting more variety for my purposes, and they're complaining about precisely the same thing. Hey, this isn't going to give me variety. This is going to take away my variety because I'm stuck using these same old cards that'll steer more powerful. You know, Wilds of Eldraine, maybe they're going to come out with one card that I can switch out of my big Mythic ranked deck, and that's it. And that's not enough for them. And they're chasing a lot more clicks than I am, right? So they're maybe a little bit more legitimately concerned about losing followers based on a kind of dull, boring environment. And I think that's part of a big thing that's led CGB to go into Commander more. And I think that's good for him. And I think it's going to entertain him a lot more. And I think it's going to help entertain his viewing audience a lot more too. So that's kind of where we are with that. So I think I'm going to end it there. And I kind of want to know your comments. Where are you guys at? Is this a money thing for you? Is it something that if the cards are around longer, you'd be willing to spend more to get them, either both in the online arena environment to buy packs or in Paper Magic? Is this just something that is entirely involved with Paper Magic and you think that it kind of sucks for arena and you don't like it? Is it helpful to you to have this kind of viewpoint as well, as opposed to most of what we've been seeing in the coverage of there? I think there's a big tendency on YouTube for people to comment on whatever Wizards of the Coast does to have it be negative, to have it automatically be this knee-jerk, oh, this kind of sucks kind of attitude. And I try and find the silver lining in things, and I think I found it for my channel at least. And but I am interested in your comments. So again, remember to like and subscribe. Share this with a friend, and tell them Travis from Tpull's Corner is here to entertain. And like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.